In which case, good evening, Cabinet. Good evening, the members in the gallery. It's nice to have you all here. So tonight is the meeting of Cabinet. We've got a number of items to progress through. I will explain as we go through the meeting. We've got some unusual things that will need to happen tonight because we will have a number of members with interest. So for the benefit of those watching in the gallery and those watching us online, you will see some unusual things because there will be times when people will need to leave the chamber, but I'll explain that as we get to each item. So the first is to note any apologies for absence. Habs?
Apologies from Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you very much. So that's our only absence tonight. Minutes from the last meeting. So we last met on the 21st of March. You've also had a copy of those minutes. Is everybody content that I sign them as a correct record? Okay, thank you very much. I shall do so. Do you want me to do that at the end or do that now? I should put a paw print on them. Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you. In which case that takes us on to item 2, members' interests. So this is where we need to receive from members declarations of any disposable pecuniary or other registrable interests or non-registrable interests in relation to any item on the agenda. Now, most unusually tonight, particularly the item on SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy, there are a number of interests. I think there might also be interests on some of the other items. So if we could go around the room in an orderly fashion, please could those that need to declare an interest do so. We're going to start here with Councillor Taylor, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Mine will be on the Riverside path in the SIL. Thank you. In St Neots, that is.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in the Stookley's Neighbourhood Plan item as I'm one of the ward councillors there. And also in the SIL item, as there's an application from Huntingdon Town Council, of which I am a member.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mickleborough, any declarations?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So item 5, SIL spend allocation. So it's for Long Sands Computer Suite project as a non-noticeable interest. I'm a ward member. Also, one of my children go to school there. And then on the Riverside projects, as a town councillor, Mayor of St Neots, and also as a district councillor for that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I will also reluctantly declare an interest on the Riverside project on the SIL item.
Thank you. Councillor Hassel.
I have nothing to declare, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. An interest with respect to item 5, the SIL paper. I'm a ward member for Huntingdon North, so I believe that's a non-registrable interest in that capacity in the Huntingdon Pavilion Works proposal.
Thank you very much, councillors. We've taken advice, and as I say, unusually this evening we have a large number of interests. So I know that you've had the advice that when we come particularly to the SIL item, that those with an interest are going to be asked to leave the room. We will still be quorate because there are 3 of us. I should say for the record, I don't have an interest to declare. There are 3 of us without an interest, so we can actually progress and make a decision. We're already minded of Cabinet's discussions earlier, so we understand the thoughts that some of you have expressed outside of these meetings. So we will then progress through the agenda, please. The third item then on the agenda is the local plan issues and engagement papers, and I think Councillor Sanderson, this is for you to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. It is indeed. So I'm happy to introduce local plan issues engagement papers. This has obviously been through scrutiny where it had, I think, a very good airing. So this report presents the proposed paper. It's part of our continuing engagement opportunities on the initial phase of this project, which started in January this year. This is a discursive document, highlights issues faced by Huntingdonshire, and it poses a series of questions to elicit opinions and priorities from local residents, communities, businesses and organisations to ensure that the future local plan represents and responds to our aspirations, needs and the concerns of local communities. So it'll cover obviously a wide range of techniques. Planning and communication colleagues are working together to maximise the extent of awareness, raising out of the engagement opportunities. That'll be over social media, online documents and surveys, and there'll be some face-to-face and remote meetings. There's also a quick read version of the paper, and this will provide opportunities, engagement opportunities for young people and those who might otherwise not be engaged. So there's 8 theme-based chapters, and they're summarised in the report. I won't go through each one of them. They're listed in front of us. We had, as I said, I thought a very good session with our colleagues at Overview and Scrutiny the other week. They did have quite a lot. I just need to find their comments now. I thought they were very very positive in their response, and they were wide-ranging. Sorry, my internet's not working too well. Here it is. So they met on the 5th of April. Councillor Pickering made some excellent points as always. Thought it was an excellent report. There are a number of questions about the consultation period, and you may notice when you look at the appendices, there are some gaps in the dates. That's because obviously we haven't approved the process yet, and there will be a call-in period as well, potentially. So it will run from the 26th of April to the 5th of July. Documents will be interactive with hyperlinks added, which they are now. There'll be some different forms of language relevant to a related document and the anticipated audience. And the scrutiny panel have asked for a copy of the interactive documents, which we will ensure that they get. I thought Councillor Corley actually made an interesting point about level of engagement, what would be an acceptable level. And I think it's probably not something that the average resident will put on the top of their priorities. People have a lot of other important things to do, as we know. But I think it is extremely important that we do hear from as many people as possible. And it's not just from residents, it's from stakeholders. Obviously, the quality of those submissions will differ, and developers will have more specialist knowledge in particular. Communication plan, and a question from Councillor Gledo, the Chair, that's being developed to promote engagement with the younger generation. Parish councils, question from Councillor Gardner, as we'd expect. They'll be included. Councillor Slade made some good points as well about the methods that we use, different social media platforms. And there was a comment from Councillor Pickering, or possibly from myself as well. If you look at the first appendices, Appendix 1, on page 9, you'll see that there's challenges and opportunities identified through Huntingdonshire Future Places strategy. That's now been updated since the scrutiny panel. There was some duplication between the challenges and the opportunities, but that's now been set out very clearly, which I think is a positive outcome from the scrutiny panel. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any questions or comments at this stage? Councillor Davenport-Ray and Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Chair. I was really interested to hear all the questions from scrutiny. I thought they were very good, especially questions around young people and how we might communicate with them, because I think the local plan that we end up with in a few years will only be as good as the amount of hard work that we put in now to make sure we're listening to all of the people in Huntingdonshire. And I see from the notes from scrutiny that there's a communications plan that is going to be developed to promote engagement with younger generations. And happy to see also that includes more than just Facebook. As I'm often told by young people, and this is a direct quote, Facebook is for old people, apparently. So my question is, the communications plan, if this is going to go live on the 26th, when will we start to see communications come out from the council around that? Because I've already had quite a lot of interest.
I think that's a very good question, and I will check with the communications team. I think if we're going to go live with this from the 26th of April, we need to have something ready to go, which I'm sure the comms team will, but I will double check with them, and I'll update colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Wakeford.
Thanks. Obviously, the review of the local plan is and development of a new one is of very significant importance to us, as Councillor Devonport-Ray touched on as well in her contribution. I think of the many papers supporting the work we're doing as we progress towards that, this is one of the more interesting and, dare I say, accessible, particularly with its versions as well for swifter reading. It is very tempting to seek to answer the questions that are in there, but that's not our role here as we're moving to the engagement phase. So I think it's a very well put together paper. I can absolutely understand the comments at scrutiny, which I was here for, seeking for ideally visiting right across the district to every parish and town we've got, and I think there was recognition that that wasn't necessarily realistic, but the communications plan that Ara touched on, seeking to equip members to help go back to their communities to try and disseminate and prompt further engagement, I think is a very sensible, more efficient use of limited resource and time on this. So I'm very happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson, is there anything else you wanted to come back on?
I think Councillor Wakeford said the engagement with parish councils, it's obviously not going to be practical for us to visit each and every one of them. So there will be forums, there'll be opportunities for them to comment. It's vital they do that because they do have a role in the planning process. So we look forward to working with them.
And I can confirm, I was just checking on my computer, that the town and parish meeting is on June the 14th, and that is part of the agenda. So that will be one of the key points for briefing. And those of us who've been meeting with our towns as part of the quarterly routine meetings have also been taking the opportunity to brief the towns too. So we'll continue that work. It's really important.
I think you're right, Chair. I think the role of local members, and this again was highlighted during the scrutiny meeting, we'll be diligent about attending our parish councils. So important as local members, we update them as much as we can. Thank you.
Indeed. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. There's lots of really interesting questions in this document, and I'm looking forward to hearing the answers that we get. I'm minded that some of the questions, I know rightly so, they're very open-ended questions, and I think we want to hear, people express themselves in their own terms. I'm slightly anxious that some of the questions are so big that we may struggle to process, like to synthesize the breadth of responses into something we can use. And I just wonder, question 2, which appears on page 12 of Appendix A, so talking about this is how the local plan's vision can complement the Huntingdon Future's place strategy. I think that's the visions and aims of the place strategy. I think that's a really profound question, and I guess I'm keen that we maybe sort of single that one out and bring it back to the people that have been really engaged in that place strategy process, because those are the people that have had these thoughts and conversations for a number of months, and I think those are the people we really need to focus in on, because realistically we're not going to get a lot of people giving the amount of time this takes to really engage with properly. But I think the people that already engage with it, it would be great to make the most of that. I think regarding town and parish councils, again, absolutely those are the people that are really kind of involved in their communities already. I know that our engagement meetings, they tend to be with clerks and mayors and chairs, and I think just to make sure that we reach out to those, the rank and file of our parish and town councillors would be really helpful as well. But yeah, looking forward to hearing the responses from our district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Well, we'll keep making sure that the communication is clear. And one of the real challenges, some things will go into the local plan, and some of that feedback will actually feed into other areas of policy and the other work that we're already planning to do. So we won't lose anything, but you're right, some of those questions are enormous. My experience of doing a neighbourhood plan on a much smaller scale is you hear lots of useful things, but it doesn't necessarily all fit into the vehicle that you are inviting those comments about. And I think we'll have exactly the same with the local plan in this iteration. We had the same previously, but we will certainly make sure it's linking up across all of the areas of strategy, including the place strategy, for which I'm responsible. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on Councillor Gardner's comment. He praised obviously the suggestion of active travel across the new developments, but inquired if this would be possible to develop this to ensure it also runs across the existing developments, i.e., you know, where we live in now, and that is so true. As a cyclist myself, you get on a dedicated cycle lane and then it stops. Absolutely, new developments, they'll have these lovely cycle, active travel, but we need to link up into our existing communities. So that is something that I would like our residents to keep an eye on and suggest anything within this engagement.
And spookily, Councillor Taylor, had you been at those quarterly meetings, you will have heard Mr. Morley saying exactly the same thing to some of our councillors and clerks, because the answer is we know there are lots of sections that are relatively short in their absence. In other words, the gap that's missing isn't necessarily huge, but actually in some instances it might be possible to fill those gaps. Others will be more problematic because of the nature of the surroundings. We may not have it physically enough space to put in a cycleway, but in some cases we can. So certainly that's something that's being actively looked at, and we would be encouraging all of our communities to let us know where those opportunities might be. So spookily on message, thank you, because we hadn't rehearsed that.
I have to confess, Chair, I'm not a cyclist, unfortunately, but I do like cycle lanes. So in my defence, no, I think that's a very good point that Councillor Taylor makes about active travel. And it's a bit frustrating, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, there's some really good models out there, but other times you just think, if only we'd thought of that sooner, you know, or we could do more joined up working with colleagues, combined authority and county, I think. This is a great opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. So I don't think there are any more questions or comments. So I think you've got some recommendations. Would you like me to remind everybody of the recommendations for you on page 15, or would you like to do that?
I can probably do that, Chair.
Okay.
I'll just jump back. Oh, it's okay, it's quite right. So, do apologise.
Shall I read it for you? Because it's open in front of me.
Yeah.
So you've got two recommendations.
Thank you.
Save you having to scroll. Two recommendations, Cabinet. The first is to approve the contents of the local plan issues and engagement paper, the local plan issues paper summary, and the local plan issues consultation easy read documents. And then also to agree that the local plan issues engagement paper, April 2023, the local plan issues paper summary, and the local plan issues consultation easy read documents can be published to public consultation for 10 weeks after this meeting and its call-in period. So can I have a show of, I'm going to take both of those together if that finds favour. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour, please? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair.
Now, moving on then to the next item. Now, Councillor Sanderson, it would normally have been you, but I understand that you might have asked Councillor Taylor to take this for you, because I believe this is the item that you need to leave us for because you have an interest in. Is that correct?
Yeah, indeed, that's correct.
Thank you. In which case, if I invite you to depart, we will come and let you know when we conclude that item, although I have a feeling it might then mean that you need to depart for the one after. But such will be this evening. Thank you very much. So we'll just give Councillor Sanderson a moment to leave, and then Councillor Taylor, I shall hand across to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is item 4. So the Stookley Neighbourhood Plan examination outcome and progress to referendum. So the examiner recommended that with appropriate modifications, the neighbourhood plan would meet the basic conditions against which it is required to be tested, and so should progress to referendum. These were discussed and agreed with representatives of the Stookley's Parish Council. If Cabinet approve the Stukely's neighbourhood plan this evening, then preparation will be made for a referendum. A potential date has been discussed with Democratic Services of the 8th of June 23. Representatives of the Stukely's Parish Council have indicated that they would support this date. At referendum, residents will be able to vote on the question: do you want Huntingdonshire District Council to use the neighbourhood plan for the Stukely's to help it decide planning applications in the neighbourhood area? So they would vote yes or no. It will then come to full council if a majority of votes casted by the residents are yes. Thank you. Over to questions. Whether or not I can answer them is another matter.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, and particularly for stepping into an area that wouldn't normally be yours to present, so thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I'm not going to test you on the finer points of detail of the Stukely's neighbourhood plan, Councillor Taylor. Thank you for presenting that in Councillor Sanderson's absence. I'm newer to these neighbourhood plans than some colleagues on this council and even around this table. But there's clearly a great deal of work that's gone into the production of this. I'm sure we'd all congratulate the parish and its team for their sterling work here. There are amendments required, modifications required by the examiner. There always are, and they don't strike me as significantly impactful to what they're trying to achieve at all. And I note from scrutiny the single comment recorded was Councillor Corney's praising the excellent piece of work and confirming to us as ward councillor that the plan is indeed supported by the parish. I think that's a good summary, and I'm very pleased that we're able to move this forwards.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. If there are no other, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I was particularly impressed in the section of the neighbourhood plan that describes their hopes for their area, that one of the main hopes is to protect and develop, enhance the natural environment of the Stukely's. And that includes things like their local green spaces, protected settlement breaks, access to open green spaces, and biodiversity. And as we move into a phase of developing our own local plan that will be the parent document to this, I think there are learning opportunities for our own planning department in what our local communities are asking for through their neighbourhood plans that we can listen to and help develop that parent document.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hassel.
Yes, I'd also like to thank Stukely Parish for your putting this together. I have been part of a neighbourhood plan group myself, so I know there's a lot of work, the amount of work that goes into it. But I always use this as an opportunity to encourage other Huntingdonshire towns and villages to take part in this process. As Councillor Davenport said, it is a way of you communicating back to our planning officers as to what you do want and what kind of development that you do want, and I think that will help us in the local planning process that we discussed in the previous item. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I would actually just pick up on the overview scrutiny as ward councillor, Councillor Corney praised an excellent piece of work. And I do say I do have to agree. And he said the plan was obviously supported by the parish. I do just need to mention as well Councillor Sean Burton, who was a lead member for the neighbourhood plan and all the good work that everyone's put into it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And I'd also like to endorse that again, having been part of a neighbourhood plan. It's not a quick piece of work. And the words on the page obviously look straightforward, but there's an awful lot of time and effort that goes into collecting those views, distilling them, and then making them fit for purpose. So we have a recommendation before us this evening, Cabinet, that we are asked to agree that the District Council should act upon the examiner's report to accept the recommendation modifications and progress this neighbourhood plan to a referendum. Can I have a show of those in favour, please? Thank you very much, and we wish them good luck as they move into that next phase. Might somebody be kind enough to go and retrieve Councillor Sanderson? Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. We will wait, although I suspect that he won't be at the table for very long, because I think the next item is the one that has significant numbers of interest. But we'll at least let him come and take his seat before we start that section. It might be a very short pause, yes, before. So for our guests, both in the chamber and online, this item is perhaps one of our more unusual ones. The SIL item, the Community Infrastructure Levy item, is wide-ranging in the number of applications that are before us this evening. The advice from our monitoring officer is that in line with our code of conduct, because there are pecuniary interests as well as disclosable and other interests, it would be prudent for those with any interest to depart for the debate so that we have the debate without the risk of a clash of interests. So, Councillor Sanderson, I'm very sorry because you will have only been back in the room for a short moment, but anybody who has an interest in this item coming forward, which is item 5, which I think is everybody bar 3 of us. So I'm expecting Councillor Mickelberg, Councillor Hassel and myself to remain in their seats. And I'm going to invite all the other councillors, please, to depart briefly. And then we will call you when the item has concluded. So this is for SIL. So everybody is going to depart who's got an interest. I will just let our councillors depart. So this is, as I say, a slightly unusual situation, but it is because of the nature, obviously, of the decisions that we will need to make this evening, because they are financial and they are substantial to those organisations who have requested support under the Community Infrastructure Levy. I understand, Mr. Morley, that you will very kindly take us through this report, and then those 3 of us remaining will need to then have a view on the recommendations that are before us. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce the Community Infrastructure Levy paper and the latest set of proposals. As you'll be aware, the Community Infrastructure Levy is a levy that we levy on the area for the provision of infrastructure to support growth, and then we administer the spend of that against a set of local policy guidance and criteria that informs those decisions. Now, the report in front of you is split into 4 distinct sections. The main section, section 4, covers the recommendations of officers having reviewed the applications that we've received for infrastructure within the area against the policy guidance that we currently have adopted within Huntingdonshire. They're the major substantive items and are for awards of more than £50,000. In addition to that, you have 3 series of appendices. Appendix 1 covers current, live and previous SIL allocations and an update on the progress against those. Appendix 2 covers allocations of community infrastructure levy of under £50,000, the process of which is delegated to 2 members of Cabinet and a corporate director or managing director, so just for visibility of those. And then the final appendix, Appendix 3, covers 2 change requests to previous awards of community infrastructure levy, where because of change in the delivery of those schemes, there's a request for you to agree to those so they can be delivered in a slightly different way. At that point, I will pause and allow you to raise any questions or make any comments before I come back in to update on the comments from the Scrutiny Committee when this was considered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morley. Cabinet members, such as we are, remaining in the room, are there any questions or comments at this stage? I think the report's fairly straightforward. Okay, Mr. Morley.
Thank you. So this was well reviewed at scrutiny. I think just some broader context to this item as a whole is there's currently a government consultation underway around the future of the community infrastructure levy, and a consultation going on about taking place around a future infrastructure levy and what that might do in terms of pulling together a number of schemes which look at infrastructure and potentially change the whole landscape of community infrastructure. So that was very much a key bit of context to the debate at scrutiny. There were some specific questions about a number of the actual schemes that were presented. So the relevant the views on the support for the police training facility and its applicability to local support. I think the answers there were well received, which is clearly in terms of community safety and making sure that our police colleagues are able to deal with issues in the community, and the contribution of only 5% of the cost of the overall scheme was considered in line. And there was also some interest in the Huntingdon Town Council application, and as you'll see from the report, some of the reasons for the officer recommendation there were a review of the playing pitch and open spaces strategy, which has recently been undertaken and will form part of the local plan, but actually considered that the scheme didn't do as much to provide some of the infrastructure around indoor space in particular that was marked as a gap within the area. And overall, I think there was a general feeling that the recommendations were in line with the current policy, but there is a commitment outstanding that some of you will be aware of to review the policy going forward for community infrastructure allocation, notwithstanding the national consultation piece, but to make sure that the local policy better aligns to the recently adopted corporate plan, which went through the recent full council. So I think, Chair, that will be the sort of summary of the key feedback points from ONS.
Thank you very much. So we have a number of recommendations. If I can just walk us through those just for clarity before we come to have any further conversations on them, because I'm aware that some of those watching will not necessarily have a copy of the papers in front of them. So the first block of recommendations are where we're being asked to note the information on projects that have previously been allocated or are in receipt of funding commitments and updates on their delivery. The section B is to agree the officer recommendations, and I'll come to those in a bit more detail because I think that's just helpful for transparency. And then item C is to agree change requests to the St Ives Park extension and the St Neots Riverside projects, which are already in train, but we've been asked to agree some changes to that funding which has already been allocated. So if I can just come to recommendation B, this refers to section 4 in the report. So just for transparency, for those who do not have papers in front of them, the first item that we're being asked to consider is the Monks Wood Specialist Police Training Facility. And the recommendation from officers is to approve. And there are 2 subject to clauses as part of that, but it's fundamentally to approve. Item 4.3 is the Huntingdon Pavilion works on the King George V Pavilion, and we are being recommended to decline. And there is a commentary in the papers to indicate why that recommendation is there. 4.4 is the St Neots Longsands Computer Suite, and this is a recommendation to approve. 4.5 is the Alconbury Memorial Hall extension, and the recommendation from officers there is to decline. And again, there's a commentary in the papers as to why that's a decline. And finally, 4.6 is the St Ives One Leisure Sand-Dressed Pitch, and the recommendation is to approve. Now, I know that subject to our decisions tonight, there may be some who are unhappy. Certainly, my understanding, Mr. Morley, is that there is detailed feedback to those who've submitted an application if they are not successful as to what they might want to consider next based on officers' recommendations. Thank you. Are there any questions, Councillor McElroy or Councillor Hassel, at this stage before we go to seeking your approval of the recommendations? Councillor Hassel?
I just wanted to clarify on the police training facility. Just my understanding, if I've got it wrong, is that this was a previous application, and now the allocation, the SIL ask is now reduced from where it was before.
Turn your mic off. Very well.
Yes, I can absolutely confirm that. So it's a much smaller percentage. In terms of the training facilities as a whole, there are considerable contributions from Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire as well. It's a 3-county area. And we're making a 5% contribution, which, as you say, is a much reduced allocation on previous asks.
Thank you.
Unless there are any other questions, then I'm going to cut to the chase. So we've got the recommendations before us. So if we take them, let's take them as 3 separate ones, because that's probably clearer just for clarity for the minutes. So the first one is to note the projects previously allocated. So I'm assuming that you are going to note those. There's nods of heads, thank you. B then is to agree officer recommendations for projects submitted in this round for over 50,000 SIL funding as detailed in section 4. And they're those 5 ones that I've just covered. That's the Monkswood Police, which is an approval, Huntingdon Pavilion, which is a decline, St Neots Long Sands, which is an approve, Alconbury, which is a decline, and the St Ives Pitch, which is an approve. Can I have a show in hands of favour of those recommendations, please? Okay, so that's carried unanimously, thank you. And then item C is to agree change requests to the St Ives Park extension and the St Neots Riverside projects as detailed in Appendix 3 and as recommended by officers. Can I have a show of hands for those, please? Thank you very much. In which case then we've concluded that. Have you got everything you need recorded? In which case might somebody be kind enough please to go and retrieve the absent councillors and let them rejoin our meeting. I'll pause for a moment just to let them take their seats. Thank you, colleagues. We have concluded that item and we have approved the recommendations as they were set out in the paper. If we can move on then to the final item, which is the adoption of the Safeguarding for Children and Young People and Adults at Risk of Harm policy. And I believe that this item might be delivered by Councillor Hassel. I was going to call you Mr. Hassel, but in this context, you're Councillor Hassel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an update to our existing safeguarding policy. A formal review of the Council's safeguarding policy commenced in January of 22. This review coincided with a countrywide review taking place and included recommendations from the independent safeguarding partnership team linked to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough safeguarding boards, both for children and adults. It's clearly a highly valuable policy, and it's something that we should take very seriously. I just move on to the comments at overview and scrutiny. So this was reviewed favourably at the ONS meeting. Councillor Alban at the ONS committee observed that that safeguarding training for councillors would be desirable, and he has agreed to raise this as a member of the development group. So I think that's a very valuable thing from ONS, because I think safeguarding is something that all councillors should be familiar with. So to get some extra training, that place would be in that space would be really good. There was a question from Councillor Burke around private events, and as I understand it from the policy is that where a third party doesn't have its own safeguarding policy is that the council's safeguarding policy would apply. So I think that clarifies that in section 15.2. I think that was the major comments from overview and scrutiny. Councillors Kerr and Bywater praised a well-written and thorough report, a sentiment that was echoed by the rest of the panel. So if we can go back to the recommendation, but I'll pause there if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hassel. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Taylor. Yes.
Yeah. I just want to pick up actually on that point, the hiring of facilities, because I did look at Councillor Burke's comment, and I'm a bit confused because actually it says on 15.2, the wording in section 15.2 would be reviewed to ensure clarity on this. So what are we trying to clarify here? So where the facilities are let to external groups or events organised which involve children, young people or adults at risk of harm, when the parents or carers are not present, Huntingdonshire Council will include provision within its condition of hiring requirement, requiring the agreement to work within the expectation of this, of our safeguarding policy, unless the event organiser has its own policy in place. I'm just a bit confused what we're meant to be clarifying, because it does say would be reviewed, the wording would be reviewed to ensure clarity on this. So I'm just trying to understand what clarity are we looking at.
Councillor Hassel.
Can I just respond, and then I'll ask Mr. Morley to respond. I think there was an argument at ONS where effectively you could have a situation where we would always have the council's the council's safeguarding policy that always applies no matter what the third party policy was. But I'm going to refer to
Mr. Morley.
Councillor Taylor, my belief is this wording has been tweaked. That's my understanding. So there was an issue with clarity. If anyone doesn't feel that this is clear, I'll happily take that away. But I think here the statement is quite clear in terms of what is expected, which is when there is somebody who's likely to be vulnerable, they must have their own safeguarding policy in place, or we will use ours, and then the requirement about DBS checking. I think in the previous version, I don't think that was as clearly stated as it is here.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So when we've got groups external groups coming to use our facilities, and they haven't got their own safeguarding policy, are we happy? Do we send out this policy? Do we say, please read it before you come? How do we know that, and the people that they are hiring have read this, and, that do you get what I'm getting at? Because we've got the policy, but how do we know that they're going to read it and adhere to it?
So this might be one of those questions that we might want to take offline, and we could sit down with the One Leisure staff and go through this in detail. But in line with any kind of hiring process, so whether we're hiring out one of our buildings, you're signing off a contract for the hire of a building or anything else, within the terms of the hire process, we will be asking them to confirm that they have read and agreed a number of these. And my understanding, but we can sit down with One Leisure and check, but I think we would ask to see copies of DBSs in the same way as, and I know Councillor Micker is the same, as somebody's involved in community sports coaching, I'm expected to provide my DBS to, in advance of being in place. So it would be a sign to confirm, and then checks in place as well on top of that.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray, and then Councillor Pitt.
Yes, thank you. The report talks about staff, counselors, volunteers, contractors, and then we've just spoken about hirers as well. One of the other key areas I see is about tenants and our tenancy agreements. When I think about the vulnerable people that come into our buildings, especially around the DWP visitors in our building, citizens advice visitors, I just wanted to make sure we have provision for our tenancy agreements and that our tenants also have similar policies.
Mr. Morley?
So I can come back to you in more detail on that. I think one of the things I would point to, and it's why there is some provision in here for an organisation might have its own arrangements, that the nature of most of our tenants are people who have a statutory duty to engage with people in vulnerable settings. So whether that's Department for Work and Pensions, but people like Muir, we've had the NHS in the building, in the past. So these are people who would have their own provision. But as I said to Councillor Taylor, within those kind of lease agreements, there are provisions around these factors. But I can come back in more detail for you later, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. And Councillor Pitt?
Thank you. Just on that point around different organisations having their own policies, actually, I think it's quite important that the different sorts of organisations have policies that fit their own, the sort of clients that they visit. And so actually this policy probably wouldn't be suitable for, a personal trainer working in one of our gyms or DWP. So I think we need to recognise that. The point I was going to make is just around this. So I'm really delighted to see there's the quick view procedure, because actually when you've got a safeguarding concern, you don't want to, dozens of pages to wade through. You just want something to go to, and it's great to see that really clear. It was mentioned by Councillor Shaw in ONS, but yeah, the HCC log of concern form is something that's behind the SharePoint, so the councillors can't access it. But actually, it looks like it's a Word document, and actually, we could probably have an online format. That sounds like it's already in hand, but really keen that that's really accessible for anyone. And even so, for me, when I'm logged into SharePoint and suddenly I find I'm not logged into SharePoint, and I don't quite understand why. So if we can find the least, so to remove any barriers for the technology to make sure that works really seamlessly, that'd be brilliant. I think it's already in hand, but just to flag that up, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hassell's nodding, so that will be taken back. Any more comments or questions then? In which case then you have before you a recommendation to approve the updated safeguarding for children, young people and adults at risk of harm policy. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? And again, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. In which case then, I'm just zooming back up to the top of the agenda because I think that brings us to the conclusion this evening. In which case, thank you very much, everybody. That was a swift meeting. It was really nice to have some visitors in the gallery today, so thank you very much for staying with us. In which case, I will say good night to all those online and thank everybody and bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much.